Chip and I are here at this low maintenance garden that we completed about 7 years ago. It's worked out very well as a low maintenance garden, and so we're going to tell you what went into its planning and its construction and why it continues to be low maintenance. Lots of customers say to me their number one or two priority is low maintenance, but then they go through this list of things they want, and the result is not a low maintenance garden. One of the best ways to minimize maintenance is to not have a lawn. A small garden like this, the lawn would just be something to look at, so it doesn't make sense to have a lawn here. If you really want certain plants, but they take shade, but you plant them in the sun and you think you can make them grow, you probably can make them grow, but it takes more water. Every time you use more water in a garden, that's higher maintenance because you have more weeds, you have more chance of diseases and fungal diseases of all kinds. When we limit water, we limit maintenance. In this garden, we've limited water through the plant palette and the design. It sounds bad to say most of the garden is concrete, but most of this front garden is concrete because it's one big courtyard surrounded by planting. I think that the very essence of the design is one way to limit maintenance. We did it in a way where it doesn't look arid and it doesn't look like we have a concrete garden. The paving is useful, functional. It's not only the walk to the front door, it expands out into an area you can sit around the tree. Chip and I like to sit on it and wave to our neighbors as they go by. You can enjoy the fountain, you can wait for friends, talk to neighbors. It's useful, and at the same time, it's extremely low maintenance. You want to limit the number of plants, the number and size of trees. The plant palette here is the olives. In this case, we used just 4 fruitless olives in a multi-fashion. So very low maintenance, appropriate for this small garden, not going to get too big and not going to envelop the house and overpower anything, not going to crack sidewalk. Blue glow agave. A lot of agave would be too big for this site at 7 years old. They don't really get any bigger than this. So it's a dwarf agave. Little John bottle brush, which we used as an informal hedge, you can see those were planted pretty close together and they're just growing together to create a separation between the courtyard and the street. On the other side of the driveway, they used skyrocket juniper as a screen, and then some daylilies, a little bit of blue fescue. So a simple plant palette, all easy to grow and not big and low water use. Almost every normal sized tree, meaning 25 feet tall and wide or bigger, is too big for a site like this. A real common one I see is camphor. You know, that's a park tree. Chinese elm, all the oaks, even Chinese pistache, which is well behaved, probably too big for a site like this. In addition to these fruitless olives, other small patio scale trees are appropriate that won't get too big for this small little site. Eastern redbud or western redbud, a lot of varieties of cercis. The other thing you'll see in the backyard are large shrubs pruned into trees. The great challenge for the garden designer shouldn't be to make the garden natural, but to make the garden so the people in it will feel natural. I'm a big fan of creating spaces, and that's what landscape design, landscape architecture is all about, creating space. We have these separate rooms, and it's really an extension of the house. You can see one I'm looking at right here that has seating and shade and surrounded by Japanese blueberry, and it has a certain type of paving, a flagstone with bands of colored concrete, and then that paving style changes as the room changes. We get into a different room with more of a formal sit-down type table and this pattern of Mexican cobble in concrete. Great example of combining low maintenance by the very nature of a design. Again, it has a lot of paving, but it doesn't strike you as arid because it's surrounded by trees of all kinds and plants and lots of pots. About a year ago, we replaced a screening shrub back there with little ollie, so we're waiting for that to grow to cover that wall. We have a nice large pot with a kumquat that's viewable from inside the house. And all the trees throughout the garden are the same. It's a variety of bay called Saratoga. So here's our Japanese maple pruned on a regular basis. You can go back to our video that we did on pruning a Japanese maple, and it's exactly like that. That's exactly how we prune this one. And by pruning it frequently, like every 6 months or so, you can keep it looking like this. The maintenance on all of these plants is minimal. The olives, in order to maintain the look, need to be thinned now and then. Little John bottle brush is probably the only one that needs a little bit of pruning to keep it about at this height. It wants to be just a little bigger than this. On the other side of the driveway, they used skyrocket juniper as a screen, and I see they pruned the top of it, but it doesn't really need to be pruned. Other than that, there isn't any other pruning. In this garden, there's not much of a problem with weeds, and we think a lot of the reason is a constant about 2-inch layer of mulch that's retained or maintained. Here we've used the double ground shredded cedar, which I like as a mulch that stays put. If you have a gardener, a lot of mulches will just blow away, whereas this kind of, you can see it kind of cements together and stays put well. I'm a big proponent of mulch and a big proponent of using our products or anyone's products that will improve life in the soil, which we've done here when we planted it. But in addition to that, the really important part is to make that an ongoing process. Every year, use some kind of input to improve the soil, and that combination of healthy soil and mulch is going to make it so you don't have to do anything to your plants. They don't get pest and disease. You don't have to worry about weeds. So that's an important part of a low maintenance garden. I just throw it on by hand and, maybe a handful for small plants and 2 or 3 handfuls for big plants. This is such a small planting area, I just completely cover all the soil because there's pretty much roots that go everywhere. It's simple, it's easy, it's economical. It makes a lot of sense. Chip and I really like this yard. It's attractive, it's interactive, it enhances the house. It's a really neat yard, and what a neat yard requires is planning. You need to plan this out and it'll pay dividends for many, many years after that. This was planned about 8 years ago and installed 7 years ago. It's done very well with a minimal amount of problems and a minimal amount of upkeep, just some basic things which we just reviewed. We thank you for watching. Tell everyone you know about these videos if you find them helpful, and make sure they all subscribe.